Chapter 19. An unfamiliar thumping sound woke Stephanie. She rolled over and realized it was well past noon, not surprising since she hadn't fallen asleep until almost 6 this morning. She lay still for a minute trying to figure out what that sound was. Thump thump. It sounded like it was coming from the front of the house. Curious, she got up and went to investigate. Steph made it into the living room without hearing the sound again. Then something scratched against the door. Startled, Steph turned to frown at the door, wondering for a second if something was going to come through it. The sound stopped, but she remained frozen for several seconds, waiting to see if something else was going to happen. Silence. She moved again, going to a window and peeking out the gap in the drapes. Steph couldn't see anything out there. She moved the curtains to have a better look. Still nothing. Emboldened by that, she went to the door and slowly opened it. She didn't know if there might be a wild animal out there or not. It had happened before. When she had opened the door about 6 inches, she noticed a plant in a pot sitting right in front of the door. She looked around but didn't see anyone or anything else. The branches swayed in the breeze. That was what she'd heard. The branches smacking against the door in the wind. Why was this pot here? And who had put it here? She stuck her head out the door and looked around, but couldn't see anything. Steph pushed the door open further, stepped out and picked up the pot. Now that she took a closer look, she could tell it was a rose bush. She moved it away from the house and set it on the far corner of the porch. Maybe Mom had ordered it, and it had been delivered. She had no clue why they'd put it right in front of the door, but whatever. Setting the pot down, a flash of white through the leaves caught her eye. It was an envelope. Probably the receipt from the order. She pulled the envelope out and took it in. She closed the door and opened the envelope as she headed to the kitchen for some caffeine to kickstart her brain, though the adrenaline of waking up to an odd noise had done a decent job already. She'd pulled the paper out and unfolded it before she realized it wasn't a receipt like she'd thought. Instead, it was a note. She stared at the page for several seconds before her brain registered what it said. My dearest Stephanie, I'm glad to see you've finally seen things clearly and have gotten rid of the lout who is unworthy of your love. Now there is nothing standing in between you and I being together. I hope you take this token of my affection, care for it, and let it bloom like my love for you. Yours forever, Eric. Fear flashed through her but quickly burned away, fueling anger instead. Why had she let this nutjob run her out of her home? She realized now that reality had no bearing on how he saw things or how he behaved. Following her here proved that. Not that she could regret the visit. She'd gotten to see and visit with her parents, and it had been great seeing her brother and sister, what little time they'd had to spend with her. But the best part of the trip, she had to admit, had been meeting Noah. She wouldn't have done that without Eric stalking her. She decided in that moment that she was done running and hiding. She was taking her life back, and it was about time. She pulled a Rockstar from the fridge, popped the top, and headed into her bedroom for her phone. She needed to let Mom know she would work the shift they'd scheduled her for tomorrow, then she was going back to Tucson. She also needed to call her boss at the diner and let him know he could put her back on the schedule. She was glad he'd understood when she'd asked for time off. Once she'd finished those calls, she saw she'd missed a message from Noah while she slept, and considered letting him know she would be coming back, but she decided to wait and surprise him. The decision to go home made, she felt much more in control. She was ready to be home. Yes, the lake was where she'd grown up and she still enjoyed visiting, but Tucson was home to her now. It was late afternoon 2 days after she'd decided to return when Steph pulled into town. Even the traffic couldn't dim her excitement at being home for the first time in nearly a month. Her own bed, her own kitchen, her own space. Her parents were great and there when she needed them, but she missed her apartment. Her excitement only grew as she closed the distance to home. On a whim, she decided to turn down the road Noah lived on and see if she could spot his truck, thinking she might surprise him later once she'd had a chance to shower and clean up after hours behind the wheel. It only took a few minutes to spot his truck. There were maybe a dozen houses on the block, so that narrowed the odds. Then she continued to her apartment. 30 minutes later, she was home and had everything carried in and ready to be unpacked. That could wait. She wasn't doing it now. She adjusted her AC, dropping the temperature some from the higher temperature she'd set it at for a while she was away, and went into the bedroom. She pulled her phone from her pocket and let herself fall face up across her bed. She lay there a moment enjoying the familiar feel of her comforter puffing around her, then picked up her phone and sent Noah a message asking if he was up yet. She didn't expect an answer, not right away. If he kept to the pattern of the last couple days, he wouldn't be up for another hour or two. By then, she could be ready to surprise him. Knowing time was short, she got up and headed for the shower. Steph was finishing her hair when her phone chirped. Her heart leapt. Excitement raced through her with the possibility of seeing Noah again soon. Checking her messages, she found it was from him. He was up. Steph, hope you slept well. Steph, what are your plans for tonight? She set the phone down and finished her hair while she waited for him to respond. Noah, dinner. Maybe play a game for a bit, then get ready for work. Noah, what about you? Steph, probably the same. Steph, except for the work part. Noah, when do you work again? Steph, I'm not sure. I'll have to talk to Mom and see. That part was a lie, not that she didn't know, only who she'd have to talk to, but she didn't feel guilty about it. She quickly used her laptop to place a pizza order, then chatted with him over text while she waited for it to be ready to pick up. As she got in the car, she made an excuse about why she couldn't respond for a couple minutes, then picked up the pizza and made the 3-minute drive to his place, parking on the street so her headlights wouldn't tip him off that someone was there. It was hard to keep from laughing as she carried the pizza up to his door and knocked. Until this moment, she hadn't thought about a peephole, but she didn't see any light from one, so hopefully he wouldn't spot her before he opened the door. The door opened and he spoke. Can I? He cut himself off when he spotted her. Steph. What are you doing here? Surprise? She gave him her best smile. I decided to come surprise you. She held up the pizza. And I brought dinner? Come on in. His surprise faded and he stepped back to let her in. When did you get back into town? A couple hours ago. Why didn't you tell me you were coming? So I could surprise you. She gave him a wide-eyed, innocent look. Duh. He took the pizza box and led her to a 4-seater table off the kitchen. You managed it. How did you find my house? You told me what block. I just looked for your truck as I came in this afternoon. He nodded. Smart. You didn't have to feed me. It was part of the surprise. Have a seat. He pulled out a chair. I'll get some plates and napkins. Wait. Steph stayed standing as she waited for him to look at her. There's something I've waited days to do. What? Noah frowned down at her. This. She moved in close, wrapped her arms around his waist and stretched up to meet his lips. It only took him a few seconds to pull her closer and kiss her back. Steph didn't know how long they stayed like that, but when she pulled away she was breathless. Wow. I wasn't sure, but it was definitely worth the wait. Noah chuckled then pulled away to get the plates. You surprise me more and more. How so? She sat in the chair he'd pulled out for her earlier. Kissing me that last night, then showing up here and kissing me again. That's not the terrified person I first encountered. He handed her a plate and put a couple paper towels on the table. I'm the same person, I've just come to a decision. What's that? I'm not going to live in fear. He got it for a little while, but I'm not going to let Eric have that much control over me or my life. That's good. Noah served them each a slice of pizza and closed the box. What made you decide this? It was a couple days ago. She told him about the incident with the rosebush and how finding the note had made her angry. Then she'd gotten even madder at the way she'd reacted about it. That's when she'd decided enough was enough. Letting her fear of him control her was even worse than his trying to interfere with her life. She was doing his work for him, and she refused to be a part of that. I decided then it was time to come back. I talked to my parents and my boss here and started planning. I had already agreed to work the store yesterday and didn't want to back out at the last minute, so I started setting things in motion to come back. Great. What's your plan now? I'm going to spend a couple days getting things in order. I was shocked by what piled up after being gone for nearly a month. My mail alone weighs 10 pounds. It will take a couple days, but Jack will get me back on the schedule. I don't expect I'll be working too much because it's slow this time of year. Where do you work that let you take a month off and is slow this time of year? Noah frowned. I wait tables at one of the restaurants off University and Euclid. It's slow this time of year because classes are out and there aren't many people on campus. When do classes start? August. I was originally going to take a summer class, but decided to go up to the lake instead. They caught up while they ate, then settled in on his sofa to watch something together before he had to get ready for his shift. She kissed him goodnight again, dragging it out as long as she could before he had to leave, then went back to her apartment. Steph was still floating on a cloud of happiness after her evening with Noah when she climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment. She wasn't prepared to come crashing down when she got to her door and found horror painted across it in what looked like red paint. Her shoulders slumped. She sighed. She'd really hoped to go a day or two without having to deal with this. Looking around, she made sure Eric wasn't lurking somewhere nearby as she pulled out her phone and snapped a couple photos of the damage, then let herself in. Inside her apartment with the deadbolt locked, the first thing she did was call the police. She reported the vandalism, but they told her since there was no immediate threat and the incident was not actively happening, she needed to file a report on the department's website. Steph shook her head and was glad she'd thought to take pictures. At least she wouldn't have to go back out to do it. Hanging up her phone, she pulled out her laptop and while she waited for it to boot, she called the apartment office and left a message about the damage, asking them to call her when the office opened the next morning. With that done, she found the website and went through the steps to file the police report, the entire time wondering if it would do any good. Once she finished, she closed her computer and set it aside. She'd hoped for a better end to her first day home. Still, she'd seen Noah and gotten a few more kisses and got to feel him pressed against her. All things considered, the day wasn't a complete loss.